Hello and welcome to another walkthrough of some sample code in our Postgres class. So now we are playing with loading of email data. This is probably the most complex bit of code that I'm going to use in this class. It's a bunch of Python code. It does a lot of cleaning. It's dealing with some real data. This data is actually from 2005 that I've got captured from a mailing list from my open source Sakai project. And so mail is a weird format. There's a format called mbox that it's a simple format. From space is the delimiter. Literally from in the first column, space is the delimiter. And then there's a series of headers with from colon, message ID. They're all colon. There's continuation lines. And then there is a blank line. And then there's the body of the message. And I can get to these sort of in groups or one at a time, and I'm going to write a bit of code to sort of pull a whole series of these things into a database and then play some full text stuff with it. So let's take a look at the code. Here we are at pgfree.com/lectures/06python.sql, and we're on this email corpus one. And again, it's going to pull down from inbox.drchuck.net.sakai.devel/sakai.devel. We're going to grab from pgfree.com/code gmane.py, datecompat.py, and hidden.py. I hope by now you've got hidden.py. And so the program is pretty self-contained. Make sure that when you start it, you don't have a table named messages. So you shouldn't have a table named messages. Drop it if you are getting started. And so, but after that, you just say python gmane.py, and I'll go ahead and run it. And it just asks how many. Now this is a spider web crawler style thing, and so it's asking me how many, and I'll just say go get me 100 messages, and it just starts retrieving them. And so it's just doing it. It's showing you, and it's pretty quick. You'll notice. Now if I go in here and I say select count star from messages, there was 100. Let me get another 100. Oop, not 1,000, 100. So you'll see that this count doesn't go up, and that's because again I'm not committing. I'm pushing rows. Still 100, still 100. Now it just went to 150. It's committing them 50 at a time, just like I did in similar examples. So this is running pretty well. You're supposed to pull in about 300 messages. I'll go to 200. This is a very fast server. It's highly cached, and so you can beat the heck out of the server. A lot of APIs have rate limits. This particular one, inbox.drchuck.net, has no rate limit because it uses a really cool technology called Cloudflare, which is free, infinitely scalable caching. So this is super fast. And I use this in my Python for Everybody class as well. Okay, so that's running, and let's see, we've got 250. It'll run for a while. So let's take a look at the source code. So the main code is in gmane.py, and it is a bit of complexity in here. The biggest complexity of this is that I'm spending some time trying to make this code clean the data up a little bit so that my work inside the database is less difficult. And the problem with all of this email stuff is that it's doing different servers are involved in it. There are slightly different ways, like this from address you'll see in a second. Sometimes the from address has like less than, greater than in it. Sometimes it doesn't. The format of the date is weird, and the time zone and all that stuff. And sometimes this is connected together, and there's different ways that they do dates. And it comes through a Linux box or some other box or goes through Google, and these headers are different. So one of the things I'm trying to do is kind of clean this data up so that when I put it in my database, I've got it kind of nice. The other thing I want to do, because I'm going to do full text stuff, is I'm going to split I'm going to pull the subject out, I'm going to split the headers and the body into different fields in my database. And so the headers are the part from the from up till the first blank line. And if I'm doing like full text searches, I really don't want to be searching the headers, although the subject line is particularly interesting, and we might want to do searches on the subject line. So I'm pulling out the date, the sent date, the subject, the headers, and the body. And that's what I'm pulling out. And I'm using the Python program because it just is too hard to write SQL to do all this stuff. Some people might tell you to write a stored procedure, but frankly, you might as well just do this. In particular, because we can connect to the database. We use the hidden trick, etc. There's these lines about ignore SSL certificate errors. Just do them. Long story that has to do with HTTPS and expired certificates. You don't care. You're talking to an API, and nothing here is important. So we're just doing that. So if we take a look at what's going on here, this is a little different than a classic crawling in that I know what the order of these things are, and I'm actually going to the primary key and the message number from the database is from it. So it's like message 3 to going from 3 to 4. That's just retrieving one message. That I know it, and so I'm just going to retrieve them in order. Hopefully they don't blow up on me, but this one's more reliable and doesn't have rate limits, and so it's a little easier to handle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide where we're going to pick up where we left off, and let me show you how this code works. It's either going to start at message 0, and actually which is message 1, because I say start equals start plus 1. But now I'm going to hit enter here in the running gmane.py, and it's going to go back to the shell, and I'm going to start it back up again. This is a restartable process because the data is all in, there's 400 rows sitting in the database. The data is all there, so I run python gmane.py, and it knows that we got start at 401. So if I just say give me one message, it'll retrieve one message, and then I can ask, it's 401. And so it doesn't restart. Now, if I wanted to restart, then I've got to manually drop the table. Yeah, the drop the table, it's right here. I don't have the drop the table. Oh, yeah, you just say drop table messages, and it would work. Okay, so let's go back to taking a look at this code. So it's a while loop, and it goes kind of, it asks how many messages, then it retrieves those messages, and how many more you want to do. And so, but it's still working down, you know, message 401, 402, 403. So as it starts, it skips any messages that are in there. So if there's a message in there, we do a select. And at this point, I want to show you this thing called myutils. Get out of there and do myutils. So take a look at myutils.py. I just made some library code, and the reason is that I have a few things like I want to query a row and fetch the first record. I know it's a query like limit 1 query or something, and I'm going to do that. And sometimes I'll do like a count star, and I actually want the value, like not just a row with a single item, a single row with a single item, but I'm just the 0th element of that row tuple, and I want it. So I'm just like, these are common things I do over and over again. So I put them in this file myutils, and if I go up to the top of the file, I import myutils, and then I can use that. So this is just myutils.queryValue. This is what I call when I know that I want a single value. This is just going to give me one row, select ID from message where ID equals 12 or whatever, and away we go. And so this is just saves me typing about 8 or 9 lines of code, and it returns none. If it's not none, see that if it's not none, we're going to continue. So that is a skipping through rows, and then I create the URL by just concatenating, and I get one message at a time. I could actually get multiple messages at a time, but then I'd need a loop inside the loop, and so I'm just going to do that. And then I have the code here. I'm going to, of course, put in try except block. I'm going to use URL lib, give myself a 30-second timeout. This is this context equals CTX is a compensation for bad HTTPS certificates. I wish someday I could just go off on why that got messed up and security people. Then I read the document, check to see if I got a 200, which of course is the HTTP OK. I specifically catch this with a Control-C so I can blow it up and get out and clean my mess up. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll do python gmane.py and retrieve 10 messages and then hit Control-C. And I actually caught this abort. And now what I want to do when I'm aborting is I want to break out of my loop, and then I want to make sure that I commit all the records that I just got done doing and close. And you've seen other things where I didn't do this and I didn't blows up and I wasn't in a try and accept, and it messed up. The other exception, who knows what's wrong with this other exception? I just am going to print the error message out. Now, one thing I should sort of point out at this point is this gmane.py code. This took me probably 2 weeks to write and get right. And so all of this stuff, you don't necessarily have to put all this stuff in. I kind of added all these things, some of this try except stuff. I added it all as I realized, you know, I have this problem and I have that problem. And so one of these things is these programs evolve as you run them, and you should write them in a way that let you do that. So you'll notice that my thing is eminently restartable. You just drop the table and it starts itself back up. And so because you're going to be restarting this so many times as you're debugging it. And this code is pretty smooth at this point. It's been run by probably 20,000, 30,000 students in Python for everybody. But the point is when you start, it's not necessarily this sophisticated. And so don't feel like everything that you write has to have a bunch of tries and accepts. Although when you're writing code, you can come back and take a look at this code and say, oh, that's kind of nice. Because this will always be available on pywafree.com/code. So even if you're not taking a class, you can see all this. Okay, so I retrieve the data and I print out the length, and you'll notice that that's what's coming out here, which URL I'm retrieving and how long it is, 3686 characters, and then I'm going to start parsing it, right? Okay, and so because I'm retrieving one line at a time, it's supposed to have a from space at the beginning of it, one mail message at a time. And I have this thing about failing, and sometimes it just fail, and so I have a little code that's smart about that. So then what I do is I check to see if I got a from at the beginning, and you'll notice that from at the beginning is not necessarily the person that it's really from. There's a from : header, which is different than from. Then I look for 2 new lines in a row, new line \n \n, and if I find it, then I break it into header and body. And again, that's going to then be 2 columns in my database so that I can separately do stuff to the header and the body. Else I kind of trigger a failure and print it out to debug it. And again, once it works, but these little failure things are a good idea, and you don't want it to go too far when it's failing. And then I got to pull out the email address, and I use a regular expression looking for the from : at the beginning of the line, followed by a less than, and then a bracket. And let me check something here. Yeah, I don't know why that was there. From that, I just took that space out. So the from : with brackets and the from : without brackets, and that's what this code is doing. And if I find one with brackets, I take the brackets out. Then the next thing that's a little bit difficult is the processing of the date. So we go find the date header, so I look for a line that has date in it, and that's right here, and then I pull out all this stuff. Friday, I want to get rid of the Friday, so that's what this .* comma does. Then I want to skip a space, and then I grab this stuff. Now this is a weirdly formatted date, and so I had to build a separate function, parse mail date. And so if you take a look at parse mail date is trying to use a thing that's built into Python called parser.parse, and if it works, it's great. Otherwise, I wrote my own date compatibility library. And I just Googled something about what if the parse mail date doesn't exist, and then I could write my own, but I really wanted to use the one that was built in to convert everything to this ISO format, and the ISO format is what then my insert statement is capable of doing. So the date part is probably the most complex, and this is falls into the category of data cleaning, right? And so then I get a sent at date, then I go find the subject, and I look for a new line followed by the word so subject at the beginning of a line, and then I do extraction of everything up to the end of that line, and I pull that out of the header data, right? So I pull the subject out of the header data, and I strip it, and I lowercase it, etc., etc., etc. And then I just insert it all, insert into messages. I set the ID in this one, which is kind of weird. And then every 50 messages I do a commit, and every 100 messages I sleep so that I can hit Control-C. And when the loop is all done, I do con.commit. And again, I can run this over and over and over and pull messages out. And of course, I can watch. So at this point, I got 403, 403. And again, it's cruising along, right? If I hit Control-C now, I think, well, I might not have got it. It might not have been in the right place. And so let's see if the commit worked. Well, I got 3 of them there. So the commit worked. Okay? So that, let me just pull 10 messages down. So that one worked. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and come back and talk about what we're going to do when we start creating these indexes.